The story of Solomon does not begin with gold, glory, or wisdom. It begins in tension. Solomon was born into a complicated royal household. His father was David, the shepherd boy who became Israel's greatest king. His mother was Bathsheba, the woman whose story with David began in scandal and loss before it turned into restoration. Solomon grew up in a palace filled with half-brothers, political ambition, and the heavy shadow of a legendary father. He was not the firstborn. He was not the obvious heir. And in royal families, that mattered. As David aged, the question of succession became urgent. One of Solomon's older brothers, Adonijah, declared himself king without David's approval. He gathered supporters, held a feast, and acted as though the throne was already his. Solomon, still young, watched events unfold that could have erased him from history. But David intervened. Before his death, he publicly declared Solomon as his chosen successor. Solomon was anointed king while David was still alive, and the sound of celebration in Jerusalem crushed Adonijah's attempt. That was Solomon's first lesson. The throne is never secure simply because you sit on it. When David died, Solomon inherited not just a kingdom, but unfinished business. There were enemies who had once cursed his father, rivals who had once rebelled, and powerful men whose loyalty was questionable. Solomon began his reign not as a gentle philosopher, but as a decisive ruler. He dealt with threats swiftly. Adonijah made another move for influence and paid with his life. Joab, David's former military commander who had shed innocent blood, was executed. Shimei, who had cursed David years earlier, eventually faced judgment as well. Solomon was establishing control. He was young, but he was not naive. Yet for all his early firmness, Solomon felt the weight of leadership. He knew he was not David the warrior. He had not killed giants. He had not led armies through deserts. He had inherited peace, but peace requires wisdom to maintain. One night, in Gibeon, Solomon had a dream that would define his legacy. God appeared to him and said, "Ask what I shall give you." It was an extraordinary offer: wealth, long life, victory over enemies, power beyond imagination. Solomon could have asked for anything. Instead, he asked for an understanding heart, wisdom to govern the people rightly, to discern between good and evil. He did not ask for riches or revenge. He asked for the capacity to judge fairly. That request pleased God. Solomon was told that because he had asked for wisdom and not selfish gain, he would receive wisdom unlike any king before or after him. But he would also receive riches and honor beyond comparison. There was a condition: if he walked in obedience, his reign would be secure. The wisdom of Solomon quickly became legendary. Soon after, two women came before him with a heartbreaking dispute. They both claimed to be the mother of the same living child. There were no witnesses, no evidence, just accusations. The case seemed impossible. Solomon ordered that a sword be brought and suggested the baby be divided in two, each woman receiving half. One woman agreed coldly. The other cried out, begging the king to give the child to her rival rather than harm him. Solomon immediately recognized the true mother. Love had exposed truth. The people of Israel were stunned. They saw that wisdom was truly in him. His reputation spread beyond Israel's borders. He spoke thousands of proverbs. He composed songs. He studied plants, animals, nature, and human behavior. Leaders traveled from distant lands to hear him speak. Among them was the Queen of Sheba, who came with hard questions and left astonished. She said the half had not been told her. Under Solomon, Israel entered a golden age. He strengthened trade routes. He built alliances. He accumulated wealth beyond measure. Silver became as common as stone in Jerusalem. His court was magnificent. His administration was organized. The kingdom was stable, and then he built the temple. David had long desired to build a permanent house for God, but the task was reserved for Solomon. The temple in Jerusalem became one of the most magnificent structures of the ancient world. Cedar from Lebanon, gold overlays, intricate carvings. It was beauty shaped into worship. When it was completed, Solomon led the dedication. He stood before the altar, spread out his hands toward heaven, and prayed a humble prayer. He acknowledged that even the highest heavens could not contain God, yet asked that God's presence rest in that house. When he finished praying, fire came down from heaven, and the glory of God filled the temple. It was the peak of Solomon's spiritual life. A king at the height of power, kneeling in dependence before God, but success carries a subtle danger. Solomon's wisdom made him respected. His wealth made him powerful. His alliances made him secure. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, something shifted. Political marriages were common in the ancient world. They sealed treaties and ensured peace. Solomon began marrying foreign princesses, daughters of neighboring kings. At first, it may have seemed strategic, practical, harmless, but it grew far beyond strategy. Solomon had hundreds of wives and hundreds of concubines. The number itself tells a story of excess. Many of these women came from nations that worshipped other gods. At some point, love or diplomacy became compromise. Solomon allowed them to maintain their religious practices. Then he built places of worship for their gods. High places rose on hills outside Jerusalem, altars to foreign deities, carved images standing in the land once devoted fully to the God of Israel. The man who had built the temple was now funding idol worship. The change was not dramatic at first. There was no sudden collapse, just gradual erosion. His heart, once fully devoted, became divided. The scripture says his heart was no longer fully true to God as his father David's had been. And God spoke to him again, not in blessing this time, but in warning. Because Solomon had turned away, the kingdom would be torn from his dynasty. Yet for David's sake, it would not happen during Solomon's lifetime. The fracture would come after him. Consequences began to surface. Enemies rose. Hadad the Edomite, Rezon of Damascus. Internal dissatisfaction grew. Solomon's building projects and royal lifestyle required heavy taxation and forced labor. The golden age had a cost, and the people were beginning to feel it. The irony is profound. The wisest man who ever lived failed not because he lacked intelligence, but because he ignored his own wisdom. He had written about the dangers of straying hearts, about pride before destruction, about the fear of the Lord being the beginning of wisdom. Yet knowledge without obedience becomes hollow. As Solomon aged, he likely reflected on the emptiness beneath luxury. The book of Ecclesiastes, traditionally attributed to him, reads like the journal of a man who tasted everything: pleasure, achievement, knowledge, wealth, and found it all fleeting without God, vanity of vanities. He writes, meaningless without eternal perspective. The king who once asked for wisdom to lead others began to understand the deeper wisdom of humility and reverence. But the damage to the kingdom had been set in motion. When Solomon died after 40 years of reign, he was buried in the city of David. His son Rehoboam took the throne. The people, already strained by Solomon's policies, asked for relief. Rehoboam responded harshly. The kingdom split, Israel in the north, Judah in the south. The united monarchy that reached its peak under Solomon fractured immediately after him. His life stands as one of the most complex in Scripture. A man chosen by God, a man gifted beyond measure, a builder of the temple, a writer of wisdom, a ruler of unmatched prosperity, and yet a man whose divided heart led to decline. Solomon's story is not simply about wisdom gained, it is about wisdom neglected. It shows how success can slowly replace dependence, how compromise rarely announces itself loudly, and how even the most gifted person must guard their heart. In the beginning, Solomon asked for an understanding heart. In the end, his story warns every generation that wisdom is not proven by what you know, but by what you continue to obey. And that is the full arc from promise to glory, from glory to compromise, from compromise to consequence, the wisdom and downfall of Solomon.